The morning started like any other in the quiet countryside. The sun was still low, and the air smelled of soil and corn leaves. A simple wooden barn stood at the edge of the land, filled with harvested corn. It was not fancy, not painted bright, but it was strong and honest, just like the man who owned it. His name was Daniel. Most people in town knew him only as the quiet farmer. He wore plain clothes, drove an old truck, and spoke very little. He never joined town gossip, never attended parties, and never argued. He liked peace. That was why he bought land far from the city. But peace was hard to keep when the neighborhood had an HOA. The HOA president, a woman everyone secretly called Karen, hated Daniel's barn. She said it was ugly. She said it lowered property value. She said it did not fit the community image. Every week, Daniel received letters, warnings, fines, threats. Daniel always read them carefully. Then he placed them in a folder. He never replied with anger. Sometimes he did not reply at all. Karen did not like that. She liked power. She liked control. She liked when people feared her. And Daniel did none of that. He stayed calm. Too calm. One evening, at an HOA meeting, Karen stood up and pointed at a photo of Daniel's barn. "This structure is unsafe," she said loudly. "It violates HOA rules. If action is not taken, we will take action ourselves." People nodded. Some looked uncomfortable. Daniel was not there. He never came to meetings. Karen smiled. In her mind, silence meant weakness. 2 nights later, flames lit the sky. A neighbor saw smoke and called emergency services. By the time firefighters arrived, the corn barn was already destroyed. Wood cracked. Corn burned. Years of work turned to ash. Daniel arrived quietly. He stood at a distance, watching the fire die. Firefighters tried to comfort him. A neighbor whispered, "I'm so sorry." Daniel nodded once. He did not cry. He did not shout. He did not ask questions. Karen arrived later, pretending to be shocked. "This is terrible," she said loudly. "But I warned him. That barn was unsafe." Daniel looked at her for a long moment. His face showed nothing. No anger. No fear. Karen felt proud. She believed she had won. The next morning, Karen sent a notice. The barn was officially condemned. No rebuilding allowed. She added fines for violations. She felt untouchable. Daniel returned home. He cleaned his hands. He made coffee. He sat at his table and opened the same folder where he kept all HOA letters. He placed the fire report inside. Then he opened a notebook and began to write. He wrote names, dates, actions. Outside, neighbors talked. "He's done," one said. "He should have fought earlier," another said. HOA Karen finally pushed him out, someone laughed. They were wrong. That night, Daniel made phone calls. Not many. Just a few. He spoke calmly. Clearly. No emotion. Just facts. "Yes," he said once. "Arson." "No," he said another time. "They don't know who I am." "Yes," he said softly. "I want to proceed." Karen slept well that night. She dreamed of new rules. Bigger power. Total control. She did not know that somewhere, far from the town, files were opening. Emails were being read. Names were being searched. She did not know that the quiet farmer she burned was not powerless. She burned a corn barn. She burned the property of a man who had spent his life judging others in silence. And soon, she would stand before him. The ashes were still warm. And justice was already moving after the fire. The town changed its tone toward Daniel. People no longer waved when he drove past. Some looked away. Others whispered. To them, he was now a problem, a reminder that fighting the HOA always ended the same way. Quiet men lost. Loud people won. Karen enjoyed the attention. She told anyone who would listen that the fire was unfortunate but necessary. She said rules existed for a reason. She said Daniel had been warned many times. In her mind, the story was already finished. Daniel did not rebuild the barn. He did not complain. He did not post online. Instead, he returned to his routine. He woke early. He walked the land. He checked the soil. He cleaned what the fire had spared. To outsiders, it looked like defeat. But at night, his house was not quiet. Daniel sat at his desk with stacks of papers spread neatly in front of him. Property records. HOA bylaws. Emails. Letters. Fire reports. He read everything slowly. Carefully. He highlighted lines. He made notes in the margins. He was patient. He had learned patience long ago. Karen, meanwhile, pushed harder. She sent new fines for abandoned property. She demanded clean-up fees. She threatened liens. At an HOA meeting, she laughed and said, "Some people just don't belong in nice communities." The room laughed with her. Daniel received the notices and added them to his folder. He did not react. He did not respond. That silence confused some people. It angered Karen. She decided to visit him. One afternoon, Karen arrived at Daniel's property with 2 HOA board members. She did not ask permission. She walked straight up to his porch and knocked hard. Daniel opened the door. Karen smiled in a cold way. "We need to talk about your land," she said. Daniel listened. She spoke for several minutes. About rules. About power. About consequences. She threatened court. She threatened foreclosure. She leaned in close and said, "You should have fought before. Now it's too late." Daniel looked at her calmly. "You done," Karen said. "People like you always are." Daniel replied with a single sentence. "Please put everything you said in writing." Karen blinked. She laughed. "Oh, I will," she said. "With pleasure." She left feeling proud. That evening, Daniel made another call. "Yes," he said. She came herself. "Yes." No threats on record yet. But soon. He hung up and returned to his desk. Across town, things began to shift, though no one noticed at first. The HOA's insurance company asked questions about the fire. The fire department requested more documents. A city clerk delayed approving Karen's latest fines. Karen blamed incompetence. Days passed. Then weeks. One HOA board member resigned quietly. Another stopped answering Karen's calls. The HOA lawyer asked for a private meeting and came out looking nervous. Karen felt a strange tension she could not explain. Then one morning, she received a certified letter. Not from Daniel. Not from a local court. It was federal. Her hands shook as she read the first line. Notice of investigation. She laughed nervously. This must be a mistake, she said to herself. She had no idea the mistake was thinking the farmer was weak. Daniel stood on his land that evening, watching the sun fall over the burned barn site. The ground was quiet. The air was still. He did not smile. He did not need to. The process had started. Karen spent the entire morning pacing her office. The federal letter sat on her desk like a weight she could not lift. She reread it again and again, searching for an easy answer, a phone call, a favor. None came. She called an emergency HOA meeting. Her voice sounded strong, but her hands shook. She blamed paperwork delays, inspectors, politics. She promised control would return. The board listened in silence. No one clapped. No one smiled. Outside, rumors spread. People whispered that the fire was being questioned. Others said the insurance company refused to pay. A few neighbors began to remember things Karen had said, threats she had made, jokes she laughed at. Doubt crept in. Daniel continued his quiet routine. He repaired fences. He cleared debris. He spoke kindly to neighbors who spoke to him. When asked about the barn, he said only, "I am handling it." His calm made people uneasy. Another letter arrived for Karen, then another. Requests for emails. Requests for minutes. Requests for security footage. She felt watched. She felt exposed. She snapped at staff and blamed everyone else. She decided to confront Daniel again. She drove to his land in the afternoon heat. When he opened the door, she did not smile. She accused him of lying, of calling friends, of trying to scare her. She said federal letters meant nothing. Daniel listened without interrupting. When she finished, he spoke softly. "You should speak to your lawyer." Karen laughed, sharp and loud. "My lawyer knows this town," she said. "You don't." Daniel nodded. "Very well." That evening, Karen's lawyer called her. His tone was careful. He asked questions she did not like. He advised silence. He advised caution. He advised distance from Daniel. Karen felt anger rise. She felt fear push it higher. At the next HOA meeting, Karen tried to regain control. She mocked Daniel's quiet ways. She joked about farmers playing lawyer. She demanded support. A few people laughed, but many avoided her eyes. Then something unexpected happened. A neighbor stood up and asked, "Who approved the fire action?" Karen froze. She answered quickly, but her words tangled. Another neighbor asked about emails. Another asked about threats. The room grew tense. Karen ended the meeting early. That night, news spread that a federal investigator had visited the county office. Phones rang. Records were pulled. Old complaints were reviewed. Daniel received a call. "Yes," he said. "I will cooperate." "Yes. Tomorrow works." The next day, a black sedan parked outside Daniel's house. Two people stepped out, calm and professional. They spoke with Daniel for hours. Papers were reviewed. Timelines were confirmed. Karen watched from a distance, unseen, her chest tight. Days later, she received another notice. This one listed potential charges. This one mentioned arson. This one mentioned abuse of authority. She could not sleep. Daniel walked the land again at sunset. He stopped where the barn once stood. He placed a marker in the soil, small and simple. Justice did not rush. It moved forward, steady and exact. He thought about years spent listening instead of speaking, watching instead of reacting. He thought about rules meant to protect, twisted by pride. He thought about the barn, the corn, the smoke, and the lesson that silence can gather strength. Across town, Karen stared at the ceiling, replaying meetings and moments. She remembered Daniel's eyes, calm and measuring. She wondered when the balance tipped, when control became evidence. The town waited. Conversations softened. Apologies began to form but stayed unsent. People sensed a line had been crossed, and they were standing on the wrong side of it. Morning came. Papers moved again. Doors opened. The path was clear now, and it did not bend. Daniel closed his notebook. He placed it on the shelf. He stepped outside and breathed the cool air. The work ahead was not loud. It did not need applause. It only needed time. Justice would finish what patience began, and when it did, the town would learn how quiet power sounds. Until then, silence held the line, firm and unbroken, waiting. It was never weak, only precise. And it would speak last. When the moment demanded truth. Without fear present, the shift became impossible to ignore. What once felt like rumor turned into reality when official cars appeared more often around town offices. People lowered their voices. Karen noticed it everywhere. At the grocery store. At the bank. Even at church. Conversation stopped when she walked in. Daniel remained unchanged. One morning, he received a call and listened quietly. He thanked the caller and wrote a time in his notebook. Then he put on a clean jacket, simple and dark, and drove into town. No sirens. No escort. Just his old truck moving steadily forward. At the county building, a clerk looked up at Daniel and paused. She checked a name. Her expression shifted. She stood up quickly and said, "They're expecting you, sir." Daniel nodded and followed her down a long hallway. Behind closed doors, the tone was different. Respectful. Careful. Direct. Daniel spoke clearly, never raising his voice. He explained the history. The warnings. The threats. The fire. He placed documents on the table in perfect order. The room listened. Across town, Karen sat in her office, staring at her phone. Messages went unanswered. Her lawyer cancelled their meeting. An email arrived instead. Short. Cold. He was withdrawing from representation. Her breath caught. She drove to the HOA office and demanded answers. The remaining board members avoided her eyes. One finally said, "We can't protect you anymore." Another added, "We didn't know who he was." Karen snapped. "He's just a farmer." The words felt weak as soon as she said them. That afternoon, a notice was delivered to her home. Court summons. Federal jurisdiction. Her hand shook so badly she dropped it. She read the name at the bottom and felt the ground move. Honorable Daniel Reeves. The name struck her like ice. Memories rushed back. His calm voice. His careful words. His silence. It was not fear. It was control. In court days later, the room filled slowly. Reporters whispered. Lawyers prepared. Karen sat stiff, her confidence gone. When the judge entered, everyone stood. Daniel walked in last. Karen's eyes locked on him. Her face drained of color. She understood then, fully, painfully. The man she mocked. The man she threatened. The man whose property she destroyed. He took his seat with calm authority. The case moved quickly. Evidence spoke louder than emotion. Emails were read aloud. Witnesses testified. Timelines matched perfectly. Karen's actions unfolded clearly, step by step, undeniable. Daniel did not look at her. When it was over, the ruling was firm. Charges advanced. The HOA dissolved. Restitution ordered. Criminal consequences followed. Karen felt smaller than she ever had. Outside the courthouse, the town gathered quietly. No cheering. No shouting. Just understanding. People realized how easily power could be abused, and how quietly it could be corrected. Daniel returned home that evening. The land greeted him with stillness. He walked to the place where the barn once stood and imagined the new frame rising, stronger and lawful. He felt no anger. Only closure. Neighbors slowly began to wave again. Weeks later, construction started. Permits approved. Protections in place. The barn returned, larger and safer. No one complained. Karen faced sentencing alone. The town learned a lesson it would not forget. Loud control fades. Quiet authority endures. Daniel resumed his routine. Early mornings. Long walks. Simple meals. His life did not change because it did not need to. Justice had spoken, not with noise, but with clarity. And everyone listened. The sentence came down on a grey morning. Karen stood before the court with no power left to hide behind. Her voice trembled as the charges were read. Abuse of authority. Arson. Fraud. Each word landed heavier than the last. The judge's voice was calm, steady, and final. Karen was fined heavily. She was banned from holding any HOA or community leadership position again. Criminal penalties followed. Her reputation collapsed in a single day. The courtroom emptied slowly. No one rushed to comfort her. No one defended her actions. The silence she once used against others now surrounded her. Outside, reporters gathered, but Daniel walked past them without stopping. He did not speak. He did not explain. He did not celebrate. He got into his old truck and drove home. For the town, life felt different after that day. People began to talk openly about what had happened. They shared stories of unfair fines, threats, and fear. Many admitted they had stayed quiet because it was easier. Because Karen was loud and confident. Because they thought nothing could change. They were wrong. Daniel's land became a symbol, even though he never asked for it. The burned barn site was no longer just a loss. It was proof that patience could outlast power. Rebuilding began slowly. Workers arrived. New beams were placed. Stronger materials replaced old wood. Everything was inspected, approved, and documented. Daniel watched quietly, offering water and thanks. He treated the workers with respect. They noticed. One afternoon, a neighbor approached him. The man looked nervous. "I should have said something before," the neighbor admitted. "I knew she was wrong." Daniel nodded. "Next time," he said calmly. That was enough. Karen's house went up for sale soon after. Her friends stopped calling. The same people who once laughed with her now avoided her name. She learned a lesson she never expected to learn. Power without respect leaves nothing behind. As weeks passed, the town adjusted. A new community board formed, carefully and slowly. Rules were reviewed. Safeguards were added. People asked questions now. They paid attention. Daniel returned to his quiet life. He woke early. He walked the fields. He read at night. Sometimes, he stood near the barn and listened to the wind move through the corn. He did not feel proud. He felt balanced. One evening, a young couple knocked on his door. They thanked him for standing up, even quietly. They said the town felt safer now. More fair. Daniel listened. Then he said, "Fairness lasts longer than fear." They remembered that. The barn was finished by the end of the season. It stood taller than before, clean and solid. It followed every rule, every code. No one could touch it. And no one tried. Karen watched from a distance as her old life disappeared. Court dates replaced meetings. Consequences replaced control. She understood too late that rules were meant to serve people, not crush them. Daniel never spoke to her again. The town moved on, wiser than before. Children played freely. Neighbors helped neighbors. Silence no longer meant weakness. On a quiet morning, Daniel stood inside the new barn, sunlight cutting through the air. He placed his hand on the wall and closed his eyes for a moment. Justice had come and gone. What remained was peace. And that was always what he wanted. Time softened the sharp edges of what had happened, but it never erased the lesson. Months passed, then a year. The town settled into a calmer rhythm, one shaped by awareness rather than fear. People spoke up more often now. Meetings were quieter, shorter, and fair. No one raised their voice to control a room anymore. Daniel watched these changes from a distance. He never attended community gatherings unless required. He never reminded anyone of what he was capable of. To most, he was still the quiet man with the old truck and the corn barn at the edge of town. And that was exactly how he wanted it. The new barn blended into the land as if it had always been there. Corn filled it again, golden and full. The smell of harvest returned, clean and familiar. Daniel worked steadily, hands moving with purpose, mind calm. He felt no need to rush. Time had always worked in his favor. Sometimes, new neighbors moved in. They asked polite questions. They commented on the barn, the land, the quiet. Daniel answered kindly but briefly. He did not share stories. He did not explain the past. The past had already done its job. One afternoon, Daniel received a letter from the city. It thanked him for his cooperation and confirmed the final closure of the case. He read it once, folded it neatly, and placed it in the same folder that once held threats and fines. That folder now rested on a shelf, untouched. That chapter was complete. Across town, Karen's life followed a different path. She no longer held influence. Her name no longer opened doors. She learned what it meant to live without control, without applause, without fear working in her favor. Some lessons arrive late, but they still arrive. Daniel did not think about her. His focus remained on simple things. Morning light. Evening air. The sound of wind through corn. The steady order of a life lived quietly and honestly. One evening, a storm rolled in without warning. Rain hit the barn hard, testing its strength. Daniel stood beneath the roof, listening to the sound of water against wood and steel. The structure held firm. He felt a quiet satisfaction, not pride, but trust. Trust in process. Trust in patience. The town, too, continued to heal. People remembered what happened not as gossip, but as guidance. Children were taught fairness. Adults learned courage did not always shout. Sometimes, it waited. On a cool morning, Daniel walked the edge of his land and stopped where the old barn once stood. Grass had grown over the scar. Nature had moved on. He nodded once, then continued walking. He had never wanted revenge. He had wanted balance. Balance had returned. Later that day, Daniel sat on his porch as the sun lowered. A neighbor passed and waved. He waved back. Nothing more was needed. In another place, far from cameras and noise, Daniel would return to work when required. Decisions would be made. Justice would move forward in other lives, other stories. He would remain calm there too, just as he had here. Because true authority does not demand attention. It waits. It listens. It acts only when necessary. The town never forgot the quiet farmer. Not because of fear, but because of respect. They learned that power does not always wear a title, and strength does not always announce itself. Sometimes, it stands quietly, watching, until the moment arrives. And when it does, it speaks once. Clearly. Finally. Then returns to silence.